And welcome back to Out of the Fog. Well, longtime PC member Tom Osborne made headlines last week with his announcement of leaving the PC party and taking a seat on the other side of the House of Assembly as an independent member. Well, how will this affect Osborne's future and the future of the PC party? And over $240 million has already been spent on Muskrat Falls before it's been given the green light. A good risk? Have the public lost interest? Joining me now to share their insight and their opinions on these topics is the Telegram's editorial page editor Russell Wangerski and reporter Steve Bartlett. Welcome back to Out of the Fog and the Telegram panel.
Nice to be here.
Well, it's great to see you here again, and we have lots to talk about this evening, so I guess we'll get right to it. Of course, Tom Osborne, a week ago today, he said he can no longer support the Dunderdale government and took a seat on the other side. He's now an independent member. I just want to get your initial thoughts on that move that he made last Thursday.
Well, I think for Tom, it was a move he obviously felt he had to make because you wouldn't do something like that lightly, but I think the fallout has been quite interesting and amusing and sad and all kinds of adjectives to watch. It's been a mix of everything, and I know the opposition parties they would welcome him into the fold, but I know that the Tory party itself has seemed to have turned their back on him and
not just turned their back.
Said some nasty things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it sort of as a measure of character, Osborne, 16 years in the Tory caucus, the longest serving remaining Conservative MHA. He's been basically spent a long time sort of at the back of the pack after being Minister of Health. And for his dedication, 16 years of service, what does he get? An absolute full court press of attack and just downright rude and petty.
Well, I want to talk about that in terms of downright rude and petty because, he was called dead wood. Joan Burke said good riddance. There was other tweets of, it makes them now a stronger party without him. Would you say that that's childish and inappropriate, or is that just the changing ways of how people are getting their message across?
Well, it's a little bit about how they're getting their message across, but it's also a lot about how just abruptly similar the message was. I mean, everybody was saying Tom Osborne is disengaged, or Tom Osborne doesn't look engaged anymore. It ended up having a look of being stage managed from the back. And one of the things that I saw right away in comments and letters to the editor is already commenters are using the words engaged in a way to make fun of Tory pronouncements or Tory press releases. Another way to look at it is what happened when Ross Wiseman crossed the floor from the Liberals to the Tories. I mean, John Efford is about as big a party man as you can have, but his response was, at the end of it, I said to Ross, go, good luck. Mm-hmm. There was some trashing in a day.
But nothing like
this. Nothing like this full court press. Let's, say not only that, you take a 16-year veteran and say, he no longer has a reputation with us. He's dead to us. It's basically what they said. It's horrible.
And, Steve, what did you think about that?
I think it's a wake-up call to anyone with a Twitter account, really, that, if you have this tool now that you can instantly express an opinion to whoever and get retweeted to whoever and keep going and keep going. So I think that if that happened again tomorrow, I don't think you get the same reaction because I think that people are starting to see that this is a tool that can be used against us. As powerful as it is to get the message out, this can come back and haunt us a little bit. And because I think like some of the tweets that were posted at that time will live for a few days, weeks, and maybe months to come.
Well, even with Joan Burke's response, I mean, right away she tweeted good riddance. But then I heard her on the radio the next morning and just said, I've had the night to kind of sleep on it and think more about it. Obviously, that was just her instant emotional reaction.
Which is great, which is kind of like what you want organically is instant reaction. But also, if you're a politician, do you want to be tweeting good riddance and having, I'm sure she'll hear that said to her again in the days to come. But I also think that sometimes now, if you go on to Twitter and look at some of the political exchanges between MHAs and that, I mean, it's really not doing anyone in the public any good to have that kind of rhetoric going on. Because there was one night, it was a Friday night, and I was just flicking through Twitter, and I turned it off. I said, I can't handle this anymore. Mm-hmm. And I woke up, when I got up the next morning, I turned it on again, and it was this exact same stuff. I'm like, my God, give it a rest.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, these are type A personalities, and they're talking about things that they care about. And one of the things that, they're known for speaking on their feet. They're supposed to be the kind of people who lead with their chins. Well, the problem is Twitter lets you do it instantaneously. And what's the one thing they tell you about responding? You know, when you're responding to someone who doesn't like a story, sleep on it. Give it a day. Think about what you're saying. You know, because the first reaction is to lash out.
In terms of just getting back to Tom Osborne and his move, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, because his family has strong political ties with the PC party. A number of his family members have been MHAs, as well as his mother, who she retired just before the general election in the fall. So I guess you could maybe assume that it wasn't an easy move for him just professionally, but even on a personal level.
Well, I think he's obviously a long-time Tory. He's from a Tory family. So I don't think this was not an easy decision for him to make. So something happened somewhere that really made him push, say, I'm done. And, he said he's been thinking for a long time. But I think it'd be interesting to see, next election, where the Osbornes are in terms of their support.
Well, one of the things about it, too, is often after this kind of change, you get a fair amount of pushback with people saying, I didn't elect someone to sit as an independent, I elected a conservative. Well, the strange fact of the matter is, in this particular defection, he's still a conservative. I mean, he hasn't changed his functional direction. He didn't leave immediately and get into bed with another party. No, I mean, the problem is this is a conservative leaving the conservatives. And in its own way, that's kind of a scarier message.
Yeah, I think he really, one thing I think he's done very wisely, he hasn't spoke about Muskrat Falls. He hasn't given his true thoughts on that. And I think...
Do you think you'll see that now?
I don't know, but I think that if he came out and that last Thursday and said something negative or against Muskrat Falls, I think he could have done a lot more damage. Right, I think that could have been something. Well,
because he's leaving at a time, I mean, he said it was, Bill 29 was kind of the last straw for him, but this is coming right before the debate, right before the MHI numbers are coming out.
So he stayed out of it, which I think gives him a little more power.
And he's also played quite a bit of the high road. I mean, Kathy Dunderdale came out and said, well, he was recently looking for a cabinet seat, and basically his comment was, well, yeah, I want to do more stuff. I wasn't looking to get back in cabinet, but I wanted a larger role in government. I wanted my hand in more things. So he hasn't responded to tit for tat with a kick of his own, which I think has left him in a much stronger position.
In terms of his position and where he goes now, he is sitting as an independent, but as you mentioned earlier, the Liberals have kind of the Liberals and the NDPs have kind of open arms to him because he has obviously so much experience within government. Where do you think is he making the smart move right now by just staying as an independent and waiting and just going to take that time to make up his mind?
I would think after so many years as a conservative, he needs to really find out which party, has the kind of vision that he wants to support. And so I would think the Liberals and the NDP have some work to do in that regard to show him, okay, we're the best option for you, right? And I think, I'm not sure if either of those parties are at that level yet where they're ready to convince him that they're the best fit for him.
And also he's got, just on a more pragmatic concern, I mean, he has, in his own district, he has absolutely no competition from the Liberals. If there was any competition at all, it was from the NDP in the last election, who managed, I think they increased their vote, share of the popular vote by about 800%. Over, they were actually a close competitor to Osborne. So he's got it, that may factor into things eventually too. And also just strictly who's going to end up being, the larger party after the next election.
It certainly makes for an interesting time in politics, because there's been really, there hasn't been any party conflicts, internal party conflicts that have been so publicized in a long time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting for people, because it is Newfoundland politics. It's been a war zone since since we first landed.
That's why everybody loves it so much. I do want to just ask one more question before we move on to Muskrat Falls. In terms of Osborne's move, and we've seen in the recent polls, the Dunderdale government kind of on a downward slope there. What do you think that this means for the government at this time? She says that she's not necessarily worried about it right now because they're only a year in to the term.
Well, I mean, politicians love to say that polls are a snapshot in time and that they don't really mean anything. But when you start connecting the dots in a trend, and the trend is going that way, well, then you do start to take notice. And the Premier has said she plans to change the way communications are done. There have been changes in her office. Look for there to be significant changes in Cabinet when they get around to having a Cabinet shuffle, which I think was basically derailed by Osborne leaving. It's going to be, there are interesting moves afoot now because unlike before where the popularity of the Premier was pushing the party forward and people are riding on that popularity, suddenly now the party is more popular than the Premier. And that creates problems for her keeping control of backbenchers and Cabinet members.
Yeah, I think that it is early in their mandate. So these polls, if these give them time to react, and if they don't react, well, that's their, that's probably not the best option at this point. You're a year in. Okay, the polls aren't looking in your favor. Now is when you take time and say, okay, let's regroup here. Let's build on this, right? Otherwise, it's going to be a different story in 4 years.
Okay, I want to move on now to Muskrat Falls because we have just a few minutes left. Over $240 million has been spent so far on prep work, construction. Government is still waiting for the MHI report to come out. There's a debate coming in the House of Assembly. I'm just wondering, we're hearing all sorts of things in the public in terms of, should they have spent all of this money when they don't even have the green light to go ahead?
Tough question. I mean, everybody in the province, put up your hand if you understand Muskrat Falls. 4 people put up their hands.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is it's a huge project. It's incredibly complex. Even the numbers that they're looking at getting now to make a final decision on aren't really final numbers. The $6.2 billion numbers that we had were originally what were called the Decision Gate 2 numbers had a 60% chance of error. Huge, broad fields of possibility of errors. We're going to get numbers now. A lot of money has already been spent, but to just keep that in context, a whole bunch of money has been spent on the Upper Churchill for years. There were consulting contracts under the Clyde Wells government. There was work done under Peckford. There's been money spent there forever and a day. So if it actually comes to a point where we say, well, we're pot committed, we've got so much money in the bank now that we actually have to go ahead regardless, well, look backwards. We've been spending money for a heck of a long time.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone should be surprised that money's being spent on the project. Government ran last year, and they won a majority. Everyone knew this was a government that was pushing ahead Muskrat Falls and wanted it to happen. So, and again, the debate that's coming up, I think government's doing that to give people a chance to hear more about it and for the opposition to ask questions, but ultimately, the government's going to pass Muskrat Falls. I don't think there's much chance of it not going ahead.
I think you're probably right. All the signs say you're right. Try renting a car in Happy Valley Goose Bay and find out that they're all rented for the next 2 years. One of the things that you have to keep in mind, though, is that whether or not it's going ahead, it wasn't an issue in the last election.
No.
Kathy Dunderdale was very clear that Muskrat Falls was an issue that was just got decided with the energy plan in the election before. This is not an election about Muskrat Falls. So if you're talking about them moving forward with, they've been moving forward with it, since forever. Since 2010 when it was signed, and since before that when they were moving their energy plan in a direction that said, this is how we're going to do it. I just don't think that anyone ever thought that the freight for the whole shooting match would be on ratepayers in this province.
Right. I think, on the election bus last year with the Tories, I saw very few people come up and protest Muskrat Falls. When we went from the West Coast to the East Coast, and I don't remember for sure. Maybe a handful might have mentioned it to the members.
It's not an issue that elections turn on. It's not an election issue. It's a big, complicated. Unless someone suddenly decides somehow or brings out some wild information that all of the money was going into one set of pockets, there's not a chance that it will become that kind of contentious issue simply because people don't understand.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that people don't understand, that's my biggest concern, is because this is a major project that, and if we look at the Upper Churchill How, the legacy of that is hardly palatable for any Newfoundlander. So I think that people are tuned out because this is so complicated. There's so much people on one side saying one thing, people on the other side saying. It's just so much.
And it's become like religion. I mean, the responses have become like a belief rather than a discussion or an argument.
That's right. Well, I have to cut you off here. We have to leave it here. We're out of time for this evening. I want to thank you both so much for coming in this week, and I'm sure we'll pick it up again next week.
See you then.
All right. Thank you very much. We are going to take a short break right now. If you'd like to make a comment on tonight's panel or anything else you see on Out of the Fog, here's how to get in touch.